In this video, we're going to learn how to graph by hand after completing a scientific experiment. To the right in green, there are 6 different steps we have to execute in order to complete our graph. And on the left in blue, we have a sample set of data. So number 1, our very first step and most important, we're going to identify our IV and DV, which is the independent variable and the dependent variable. You most likely have probably already done this up to this point, but you want to make sure that you have those correct before you start any of your steps. So over here on the left, we have D parentheses M, so that's distance in meters. And then in our second column over here, we have T parentheses S, which is time in seconds. So I've already identified that distance is my independent variable, and I know this because I have physically changed and manipulated that variable. I increased it by 2 meters each time. Therefore, I know it's my independent variable. For T, my time, I know that is my dependent variable because that was the variable that I was measuring the results of to see how or if it responded to the change in distance. So now that we've completed step 1, we're able to do steps 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we've completed steps 1, 2, and 3. We've identified our variables first so that we can make sure that we place them correctly. And then we went ahead and then we did step number 2, which is to title our graph, the dependent variable versus the independent variable. So R specifically is time versus distance. And then step 3 is labeling each of the axes with the proper name and the unit. The independent variable always goes along the x-axis, and then the dependent variable always goes along the y-axis. Okay, so now that we have completed steps 1, 2, and 3, we're ready to get into the numbers. So we're going to develop a scale that's going to fit properly into our graph, allowing us to utilize the whole graph and all of our numbers. So you have to do a couple steps. You take a look at each column separately. So I'm going to take a look at my X column, this column right over here, the very first one, and then I'm going to grab the largest number in my set of data, and I'm going to divide it by the number of boxes that I have. So I'm going to count up my boxes over here, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So if I were to perfectly place a number into each of the boxes, it would be 10 divided by that 11 boxes. If I take 10 divided by 11, it gives me 0.91, okay, which I'm going to round up to an even 1. Okay, I'm going to do the same exact thing for my time. I'm going to grab the maximum number in my range, which is 31.2. Okay, and it doesn't have to be too exact. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bump it up to 32. Okay, if you left it at 31.2, that would be totally fine. And I'm going to take that 32, divide it by 11 because there's also 11 boxes going up. I'm going to put in 32 divided by 11 into my calculator, and that gives me 2.9. Okay, and again, we don't need to be that exact, so we're going to go ahead and round that to 3. And the rule is, anytime you are over a whole number, you always round up, which is against our normal rounding rules, which is 0.5 and up. Okay, for example, if our number came out to 2.1, we're still going to round up to 3, or else we're going to run out of space. If our number was 27.3, we're still going to round it up to 28. Okay, so if you're just a little bit past the whole number, you always round it up no matter what. when you're deciding what increment to increase by when you're scaling. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my numbers along my X and Y axis, and then I'm going to plot my points. Okay, now I've completed steps 4 and 5, which is developing a scale and plotting my points. I always plot the points last because that's definitely not a step you're going to forget. So you just want to make sure everything on the outer parts of your graph are completed first before you plot the points. And then our very last step would be to potentially do a best fit line. So making a best fit line by hand isn't always the best way to go, but sometimes it's your only option. So if you have a relationship that's fairly linear, what you're going to do is place a line that best fits the trend of your data. So if I did that, I would lay a ruler onto the page, and to the best of my ability, I would fit that ruler in between the points and then trace it along the ruler to get my best fit line. And that line is going to be the best representation of the overall trend and relationship of my data. So if I wanted to solve for a slope or get some more specific information about my data, then I'll go ahead and use my best fit line. Okay, so that concludes our last step, and that is how you graph by hand. Thanks for watching and listening.